Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to part 7 of the Metasploit Mega Primer. In this video, we will look at Metasploit database integration and third party tool integration. And finally, we will look at automating the exploitation aspects of Metasploit. So, the big question, why does one need a database in Metasploit to begin with? Well, let's go ahead and try and visualize what typically happens during a pen test. There could be possibly hundreds, if not thousands of machines on the customer network. Each one of these machines may be running, dozens of services. And you would ideally want to try maybe hundreds of exploits against them. At the very same time, once you've tried the exploits, found the vulnerabilities, you would want to go ahead and generate reports for each one of these machines. Now the complexity is compounded simply by the fact that there could be different physical locations you would want to cover at the same time. Also, there might be multiple pen testers working together, right? And hence there is a need to share results among themselves. So, as one can imagine, this is a management nightmare, and the storage of these results is both a short-term as well as a long-term requirement, right? So what does Metasploit do? Well, it actually allows you to store these test results into a database, and this is where the Metasploit database integration comes in. Currently, the Metasploit databases supported are MySQL, Postgres, and SQLite. So SQLite is something very interesting because it is basically a file-based database, and it does not require any server process. Basically, the client which wants to read and write from the database will do so directly from the file using different APIs. We'll look at SQLite a little bit later. So the whole database integration itself is very simple to use. And you could also go ahead and actually connect to the database server and generate custom queries to find patterns and targets. For example, if let's say out of hundreds of those machines, you want to find out which of the hosts have port 23 open and serving, then having all the data about every host in a database definitely makes the life very easy. The only downside is that unfortunately there is no inbuilt reporting capability in the Metasploit framework. However, for people who would like to probably really want reporting, they could choose to go ahead and actually purchase Metasploit Express, which has this functionality, right? So without further ado, let's go to our Metasploit screen. If you would notice, all the different database backend commands are mentioned together as a group, right? So let's try and understand how to use the database commands. Now, most of us have already used MySQL and Postgres, and hence what I'll do is I'll probably allow you to play with these two SQL servers and run Metasploit yourself. In this video, I will show SQLite. The reason I'm choosing SQLite is a couple of good reasons actually. First being it is very lightweight and simply you can run it off a file, no need for a server process. The other interesting thing is if you want to share your results with, let's say, your friend who's in a different physical location, you could just mail him the SQLite DB file and he could go ahead, open it there and actually look at what you've done. So sharing results and data is very simple. Also, apart from a little bit of advanced SQL, which would involve merge and joins and some other typical cases, SQLite is practically good enough for most of the regular database queries and insertions and updates you would want to do. Okay, so how do we use it? Well, first we need to go ahead and select a DB driver, and we go ahead and select SQLite 3. Now the next step is actually go ahead and create an SQLite DB file and actually have Metasploit have a connection to that so that we can read and write data from it. Right, I use the db underscore connect command and give it a database name. So if this database already exists on the file system, then it will go ahead and just connect to it. If it doesn't exist, it will create it and then connect to it. Right? Okay, great. So it says creating a new database file successfully connected. File name is Metasploit. Now, this file is actually created in the directory from where you have invoked Metasploit. So I've done it from the root directory. Right, so going back. Now, there are a lot of things you can do, but before that, let's go ahead and actually figure out what are the different tables, etc., which has been created in this DB file. For that, let's use the SQLite client and connect to this database file. Right, we can use the .help to actually figure out various options. First thing I would want to do is look at all the tables available. So these are all the different tables which have been created by Metasploit in this database, right? Interesting ones include services, hosts, exploited hosts, etc. Now we could also go ahead and have a look at the schema, right? One easy way is actually go ahead and dump a lot of things. Okay, so this is actually dumped all the different tables and their schemas, right? So let's just go a little bit up ahead. And let me go ahead and show you an interesting table. So for example, this is the create command for the hosts table, which contains a lot of interesting things, right? Now, another interesting thing about the dump command is that you can just take all this and probably use it in a compatible SQL server directly, right? Okay, so where exactly is all this code? Well, if you are interested, come back to this in a minute, but actually go to the Metasploit framework directory, go into data, then go into SQL, and here is where all your code is to create the different tables, etc. Right? All the database creation, insertion, everything is actually here. Right on. Okay. Coming back, let's go ahead and actually look at this file in a bit. So coming back, so of course you want to go ahead and populate some data in this. Now there are multiple ways to do that. One of them is actually going ahead and running nmap through Metasploit, and that will go ahead and automatically populate the table hosts with the host IP address and some information, and depending on the kind of scan, it might also go ahead and populate the services information, right? So we'll use the db underscore nmap command. Let's do version detection, and let me give it the remote IP address of our victim machine. So in this case, it is 1.6. Right, let's go ahead, run this. So this fires up nmap from within Metasploit, but the interesting thing is that the results will be fed directly into the SQLite Metasploit database, which we just now created. Let's go ahead and give it some time. Awesome. So if you notice, it's given us the open ports, name of the services, the versions. It's even guessing that this is probably most probably 2000 or XP, right? Great. So now if from within Metasploit you want to see some of these results, you can use the db_hosts command to look at all the hosts in the database. Now if you notice, this is very cluttered in the sense there are a lot of columns and the output isn't very clean. So what we could actually do is go ahead and specify which which columns we are interested in, right? So definitely the address column, definitely I would say the MAC address might be interesting, and let's say created at, right? Awesome. So if you notice, actually the mistake I had done previously was actually have an extra space between the comma. That's not allowed, right? So this is the address of the host, this is created at, and this is the MAC address, right? Now the DB interface also allows us to add hosts manually. Okay, we would actually even fill up some of the other details, right? And this gives us some information about those hosts. Now, one of the other things it allows us to do is actually hit db_services and look at the different services presence on the host discovered, right? So once again, this is a bit cluttered. Let's go ahead and actually just take the name, right? So one of the other things we need to ensure is that there should be no spaces after the commas. Right, my Metasploit terminal is a bit hung because I'm running it in very low amount of RAM. I think it should just quickly recover in a minute. Okay, awesome. We can also add info, and this gives us a pretty good information about the different services, the ports they are running, the protocols being used, the state, which is of course open, the remote host they're running on, the workspace we are working in, and finally, excuse me, the info field, which tells us about what is this service and a little bit of more information, right? Great. So there are a lot of other interesting quick commands here, like you have the ability to delete hosts and ports, etc. You could even go ahead, disconnect, do a lot of interesting things. Now, here's the next level. Before we go here, we can go back and actually load the database once again in the SQLite client. Now, one of the first things you would want to do is actually run some queries like we would do in a general SQL server. Hosts would be good. So if you notice, we are able to dump the database in some format. So let's go ahead, use help, and try to figure out what all we need to do in order to see this in a more proper way. Okay. So one of the important things you require is basically display headers, right? This is actually done using the header on or off. So let's go ahead, hit header on, and now you will notice when we run the same command, we are able to see the column names. Now this seems to be a bit cluttered, so let's actually change the mode in which we are displaying. So let's set the mode and let's actually make it column mode, right? Let's go back here, hit it, and now you're able to see different values. So once again, bit cluttered because too many values. I just am interested in the address and probably in the MAC address and the created at field. Great. Right? Awesome. Similarly, we can actually go ahead and look at the services table. Once again, too much of clutter. Let's concentrate on the host ID, the port, and the name of the service, right? Great. Now we can do a lot of interesting things. For example, actually do an order by and then say port number descending, right? So if you now notice, it's printing this in descending order. We'll also do this as ascending, which is what we got previously. We could even run some interesting queries once, let's say we have hundreds of hosts and their services enumerated, something like select star from services where, let's say we are interested in the daytime service, maybe we found a vulnerability there, right? Where port is equal to 13. Right, awesome. So we get particular host ID. Now using this host ID, select star from hosts where host ID is equal to 1. Oops. So let's just remember hosts ID is 1, and here what it is named as is just simply the ID attribute. Sorry, ID column name, right? And we automatically know that the IP address is 1.6. Well, what I'm getting to is once you have enumerated a whole subnet and you enumerated a lot of services in it, well, you could go ahead, run multiple database queries and do some interesting analysis about the network. For example, you could arrive at conclusion saying all Linux machines basically have, let's say, telnet still enabled by default, right? Which is something not desirable. But although other interesting things you can do, and there's another little table called notes where discovered fingerprints and a couple of other interesting things are kept. So you can explore these different tables and look at what is there in these tables and understand more about them, right? The best part is that one could even visualize a simple report generation tool which could query this database, get data out and populate it in XML, HTML or PDF format. Okay, so I leave using MySQL and Postgres as an exercise to you. I think those are fairly straightforward and simple. I found SQLite to be pretty nifty and very useful, especially when you want to do something very quick and maybe just share the results immediately with someone else. Right, integration with third-party tools. Now this is something also very interesting where you can actually import results from other tools into the Metasploit framework and then work on those by trying various exploits, etc. Right? So currently it supports Nmap, Nessus, Amap, Qualys, and of course Metasploit Express. Now you can have a look at all of this. Let's go back to our Metasploit terminal. And these will actually allow you to import different data. So let me give you a quick example. Let's say we want to import something from an Nmap result. So it already tells you the -ox is the command. So let's exit and let's go ahead and run Nmap. Version detection and OS detection on the local router and give it the option to generate this XML. Let's call it router.xml. Right, so let's allow Nmap to run and let's see what happens. Okay, interesting. Looks like an embedded device. Who are we? Anyway, so now in this folder we have the router.xml, which basically contains the whole dump of the result which you are seeing in the screen. So what we can very easily do is use a simple function db import nmap xml and just give it the file name, which is router.xml. Right, so now if you go ahead and hit db hosts, you will notice that 1.1 has been added, the MAC address, all of that has also been populated. Awesome. And similarly, db underscore services would contain both for 1.6 as well as for 1.1, right? Here we see 3 entries for 1.1. Great. So this is how it is possible to go ahead and import results from different third-party tools which Nmap supports. Now the beauty is you can run those tools from different computers, but bring all the results in one single place to do a lot of interesting analysis. Right? Let's go back to our presentation now. Okay, this is where it gets more interesting. So right now in our database, we have a list of hosts, a list of ports and services open. So I guess the next important thing is to go ahead and check which one of these services are vulnerable to attacks and to actually exploit those vulnerable services. Now, as one can imagine, this can be a pretty tedious job, right? If you had to try each and every exploit of the whole 600 exploits available, it would actually take a very long time. And this is where you can use the db underscore autopon command. What does this do? Well, it goes ahead, takes the list of hosts or host if you specify so, takes the services, either all the services or ones you specify, and then finds matching exploits in the Metasploit framework. Then it will try each one of these exploits one after the other to break into the host. If it succeeds, a metapredator session is spawned, which you can then use. And if multiple services are compromised, well, it will even give you multiple metapredator sessions. And the interesting thing is, well, you can configure the target specifically by going ahead and giving it host inputs, subnet inputs, and even service inputs. Right? I think this is best shown by a demonstration. So db underscore autopon, let's look at what are the different options. Now, show all matching exploit modules is interesting because this is what we want to run against. Ideally, you would want to also select different modules based on the port, right? And you would want to launch exploits against them to actually check if you can break into it. Here is another interesting example, which is the reverse connect shell. This might be interesting if you suspect that probably the host you're not allowed to have a direct connection to the host, and maybe you would require some sort of a reverse connect to circumvent a firewall. And here you can actually select which hosts you want to test against, and a lot of other interesting things, right? So let me do a quick demonstration where I'll select ports, I select modules based on the port. I would launch exploits. I'll probably just stick to a bind shell by default because I know currently there's no firewall, but if you suspect, you can use that. Give me a list of all of these. And then what I can also do is actually tell it only to concentrate on 1.6, right? Okay, so I've run db autopon. Now we should be able to see something interesting. It's going ahead and loading up all the different exploits, and if you notice, it's already started trying out different exploits on the remote machine. Awesome, this is so much faster, right? Now, whether you get a session or not, it totally depends on whether the remote system is vulnerable or not, right? But the whole point here is to actually go ahead and see that how db_autopon is actually going ahead and making the whole process so very fast, right? And this typically will come in hand when you're actually doing a pen test or a vulnerability assessment exercise on a very large work group of computers, right? So this might take some time to finish execution, and you might actually go ahead and also get a Metasploit shell depending on if the exploit worked or not. So we let that run. Okay, so this is what I had in mind about db_autopon. So, well, but if you notice in this case, you are not able to get a Metasploit session. Now, the reason I am showing you this sample is that I think most of the demonstrations on the web somehow portray Metasploit as this magical tool where you're always going to go ahead and have a remote exploit which is going to work against every computer in the world. Well, nothing could be further away from the truth. Now, to be very honest, the db_autopon or any of these exploits would only work on computers which have been totally uncared for, no patches, nothing. Right? People have forgotten to patch the services and have not done the basic security measures they should have taken. Right? However, the reason I showed you that probably you might not get a session is not to get disheartened, but to actually pave way for a lot of future videos where I will show you how to go ahead and do exploit research and a lot of other interesting things, using which you can go ahead and still compromise hosts using the framework, but not the ready-made exploits of vulnerable services available, right? Well, that's all I had in mind for part 7. Hope you enjoyed this. This is a very simple video where I guess this is mostly about how to retain data in Metasploit, cross-correlate it with a lot of other hosts by running your own custom DB queries. And last but not the least is automating the whole task, and even at times using third-party tools and integrating them with Metasploit. Once again, I am very grateful and thankful for all the nice comments you leave behind. Would request you to please let me know how you found this video, and also let me know what are the other things you would like to see in this video series. I will promise to include as many of those things as I can. That's all. Have fun. Ciao.